What's up, y'all? Peace. Jay Dizzle, Liberation Minded Media. Make sure that y'all subscribe to this channel. As you know, my other channel is under attack. Now, before I start out with this, before I show you the buck dancing that is being endorsed by the Republican and Democratic Party on this reparations issue, what I want to do is just to set the context. I want to show you something that I said a few months ago. It's not the only time I said it, but this is just, you know, one of the times that I said it that I'm gonna go ahead and show a receipt for. Let me do a screen share real quick. I want y'all to see something real quick. Let me get to there we go. I want y'all to check this out.
We bringing all facts. Okay, yes, sir. So read a paragraph, maybe a couple paragraphs, but it's only about 2 pages long, dear family. And this is the actual reprinted from the U.S. congressional record. Homosexual activist outlines goals of homosexual movement. Okay, again, this guy was a gay revolutionary. Okay, but it's so nefarious. What he's trying to implement is so nefarious, it resembles something like the Illuminati. Okay, so here it is. We shall Sodom. This starts off like this. Listen to it. We shall sodomize your son, emblem of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them in your school, in your dormitory, in your gymnasium, in your locker room, in your sports arena, in your seminary, in your youth groups, in your movie theaters, bathrooms, in your army bunkhouses, in your truck stop, in your all-male club, in your houses of Congress. Whenever men are with men together, you soon shall become our minions and do our bidding. They will recast in our image. They will come to pray and adore us. Okay, that just shows you the wickedness that's going to take place in just one paragraph. And just one paragraph, they said they're going to sodomize your boys, sodomize men, no matter where they find men at. You know what I mean? And you know, so I'm not going to go too further. I'm going to let Brooks go in that.
All right, so what that is right there, that's from a okay, so let me just tell you where that's from. So, and the reason why the quality isn't the best is because they actually took down that particular video that I made. But I put that within another video that's called NAACP endorses the LGBT. So within that video, I put the gay manifesto video, which they already pulled. So I just wanted to show you what it said in case you couldn't hear it clearly. What it was basically saying is that 1987, Michael Swift wrote what's called the Gay Manifesto. Within that manifesto, what he said is that they're going to sodomize our boys in different situations, in the school, in the gymnasium, in Congress, just all across social board. They're going to sodomize and force their agenda upon us. They're going to legalize it. They're going to make it to where we can't say nothing against it. They're going to make it to where we actually adore and actually back them in what they're doing. And basically, you know, it laid out the agenda. And it was a paper called the Gay Manifesto, which was written in 1987. So now let me fast forward to what I said later on in this video, just to show a little receipt. Just to show you that, you know, it's not that it's hard to understand these things, but sometimes you just need clarity and receipts. Just to show you the irony of now what's going on with that reparations movement. So go ahead. So check this out for us. And some of these people ain't really standing for us because now they're endorsing this LGBT. That means now they're probably going to have a say on the reparations issue. And why is no one speaking about this? You know, all the ADOS rhetoric and thing that's going on, you know what I'm saying? I've never got on the sister because she's a homosexual and made that a reason not to support the ADOS. because it's bigger than that. It's bigger than how I. Okay, so the video that the Gay Manifesto was made about 2 months ago, right? And that's one of the times I publicly said that, look, when we have this normalization of LGBT, what I said is specifically is when you have the LGBT now endorsed in the Equality Act, now officially seen as a civil rights movement, which only really happened because they used black faces as the front of their movement, because without using black faces as the front of their movement, they're just a bunch of privileged white people with a different sexual orientation. So they have to use black people. And I stated that within this message, and I said this before. So they have to use black people in order to justify or sell the idea that they're a legitimate civil rights movement. So when the NAACP endorsed them into the Equality Act of 1964, it basically gave them clearance to make decisions when it comes to civil rights issues that traditionally were for black people, or ADOS, whatever you want to label us. That's traditionally what it was for. That's who fought for it. That's, who bled for it. That's the struggle that we've been having for the past centuries. So now to allow people to get into the movement based on a sexual orientation, it opens up the civil rights movement to people who the civil rights movement was not supposed to benefit, and people who don't actually even need protections and the different things that the civil rights movement was about, right? So now we fast forwarded to the congressional hearing on reparations. And as I told you, the LGBT now will have a say-so in reparations. Now, I originally figured that it would be white people, but at the same time, it's the same thing. Because like I say, they like to put a black face in front of it in order to manipulate things that they need to manipulate for their particular agenda, which in this case is to devalue or undermine the needs of reparations. The legitimate demand of reparation has now been compromised. About her section. Excuse me. So now what I want to show you is this. This is Coleman Hughes. Now, look, this isn't photoshopped. This isn't a parody or edited video or somebody that's hating, that's trying to make fun of this dude right here. This is actually a video that he produced and made himself for a song that he created. I think it's called My Dick Works or something like that. So let's just check this out real quick, and then we're going to get to his actual comments. You see? Now you probably never heard of this dude. Who really has, right? But this is somebody who they elected to sit on the congressional hearing of reparations, right? This is somebody, saying I did a different video on the other channel, on my Nettercat YouTube channel. I did a video, and I showed his Instagram feed, how salaciously moist it was, how, he's no one special. You know what I'm saying? He's not like a known individual who's known to champion for civil rights. He's not anything but an aspiring rapper and a moist advocate at the end of the day. Yet, rather than allowing someone like Claude Anderson or Umar Johnson or Cynthia McKinney or Irritated Jeannie or Hashima Zinga or the plethora of individuals who could have been speaking for reparations from a practical, logical, historical context, they picked this dude. They pick him. You can imagine what his agenda is. But now let's go ahead and go to what he actually said. So the reason I'm doing this is not to hate on anybody for their sexual orientation. But as always, I just want to show you the agenda and why it's important. First of all, that we do not allow other people to control the narrative of the reparations movement. We can't allow other people to do it. That's what the ADOS is about. So even though I'm not a strong advocate for the ADOS, I do understand why they're making a different distinction that they're making. Although I think it's a little bit too divisive the way they do it, I do understand the principle behind it. Because the danger of allowing other people to control the narrative of what the reparations movement should be about and what we're demanding, we have to be the voices for that. So we have to be the ones that advocate for our own reparations movement and not allow it to be hijacked. Because if you watch the hearing, they made it about Democrat versus Republican. They made it about everything but cutting the check. And they kept implying that we're talking about allocating federal funds in order to pay the check or to cut the check. When I showed you in the last video I did on my Nethercat channel, why that's a false narrative and why that's a dangerous narrative, because in actuality, it's more of like a class suit in which we will be trying to we will be demanding that those who benefited financially the most, the companies that are still in existence that benefit the most, be the ones that cut the check, and the government will have its own role to play. And also went over the 10-point reparations 10-point reparations program by the IBW 21, which the link is also in the description. Now, let's go ahead and break down his actual sentiments in the reparations hearing, which is about 5 minutes long, but let's go ahead and get to it now.
Review, the City Journal, and the Spectator. He's studying philosophy at Columbia University, and we appreciate your attendance, and you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Cohen, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. It's an honor to testify on a topic as important as this one. Nothing I'm about to say is meant to minimize the horror and brutality of slavery and Jim Crow. Racism is a bloody stain on this country's history, and I consider our failure to pay reparations directly to freed slaves after the Civil War to be one of the greatest injustices ever perpetrated by the US government.
So far, so good. So you can see his credentials here. I guess he's a columnist, an author, and he for an online magazine that no one's heard of. But so, I mean, so far, so good. Yes, it was atrocity that the reparations weren't paid sooner. I get it. Let's go.
But I worry that our desire to fix the past compromises our ability to fix the present. Think about what we're doing today. We're spending our time debating a bill that mentions slavery 25 times, but incarceration only once.
Okay, let's start there. So because this is a slavery, as it says right here, slavery reparations hearing, why wouldn't it speak on slavery 25 times? However, because we're familiar with documentaries like the 13th, or even if you're not familiar with the documentary, all you have to do is Google the 13th Amendment, and it lets you know that slavery has been abolished except for those who have been convicted of a crime. In other words, meaning that once you're convicted of a crime, you can become a slave again. Therefore, when you highlight the fact that disproportionately Black people get longer sentences for the same crimes, and they also get charged far more than others and are jailed at a much higher rate, not because they do more crime, but because our neighborhoods are more policed and because of the discrimination from the police department, which really grew out of the slave catchers of the enslavement of the slave trade. Meaning that the police, by very nature, come out of an apparatus that was used to capture slaves that ran for their freedom. But let's continue.
In an era with no Black slaves, but nearly 1 million Black prisoners.
Like I just said, the prisoners are now, according to the law, slaves.
Mention homicide once at a time when the Center for Disease Control reports homicide as the #1 cause of death for young Black men. I'm not saying that acknowledging history doesn't matter, It does. I'm saying there's a difference between acknowledging history and allowing history to distract us from the problems we face today.
Now, listen. You know, it's interesting when you see cats like this buck dancing on here. Not like you see what kind of dancing he does. When he's not pole dancing, I guess he's buck dancing. He's a pole/buck dancer. But it's interesting that he's saying these things that he's trying to distance or detach from the reparations and from slavery. However, you can't do that because the reason we study history is so we won't repeat history in negative ways. No one says to the Jewish people who still get billions of dollars because of what happened to them during the 6-year Holocaust. Those people are not still alive, yet Israel still receives billions of dollars to the point where now they are one of the most influential military and economic powers, not just in the region, but in the world. They're not even getting paid by Germany. They're getting paid by the United States government. Nobody fights that. Nobody says that that's wrong. Nobody says that that was, nearly 100 years ago. Nobody says that those people are not even still alive. Therefore, we shouldn't be paying reparations. But when it comes to us, all of a sudden, they want to detach what's going on now as which is the effect of what happened. And of course, in order to do it most effectively, they're going to use our own people against us. But they didn't just use our own people. They happen to use the leverage of the LGBT community. And one of our own people that's clearly a part of the LGBT community, they're using him in that movement against us. And the reason why they even have a floor to do that is because the NAACP endorsed them for the Equal Equality Act, or the Equality Act of 1964. So as I stated before, them doing that is going to give them leverage to be able to weigh in on issues like reparations. Like it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that all the people that they use, most of the black people that they use in this hearing, well, they use this dude. They use an ex-NFL football player who spoke about how he's doing well and it's not fair to this and that person and that person. They used all these different arguments. They wanted to argue Democrat versus Republican. They made this something that it's really not. Let me continue.
In 2008, the House of Representatives formally apologized for slavery and Jim Crow. In 2009, the Senate did the same. Black people don't need another apology. We need safer neighborhoods and better schools. We need a less punitive criminal justice system. We need affordable health care. And none of these things can be achieved through reparations for slavery.
Now let's go ahead and I'm going to stop it there because when you read through the 10-point program for reparations introduced by the NAARC, also known as the IBW 21, then what you're going to find is that those things are definitely addressed in reparations. Matter of fact, those reparations would help alleviate those things. And we wouldn't need those things to the capacity that we do if our history and our culture and our tradition and our civilization wasn't interrupted by the enslavement. There's something that Tariq Nasheed said, which to me made a lot of sense. He said that we weren't brought to America, we built America. We built the United States of America because there was no such thing as the United States of America until we built it and then helped their own Revolutionary War for it to actually be established. So when they make these kind of arguments as if we don't deserve our just due for helping in the creation of or help build a nation that now reigns supreme as a mighty empire, that's very disingenuous when everybody else gets reparations. That's very disingenuous when people who are family and ancestors or descendants of Civil War veterans from the South get reparations. The slave masters got reparations for no longer having to or no longer being able to possess Black people as property. They actually got money as compensation for that. And a lot of that money came from not only the government, but it also came from some of the insurance agencies of the day where they had slaves insured. Many of these insurance agencies like AIG, like Aetna, are still wealthy to today. And those are some of the people, a couple of the different corporations that we will be demanding payment from ourselves. Let's continue with the buck dancing.
Nearly everyone close to me told me not to testify today. They told me that even though I've only ever voted for Democrats, I'd be perceived as a Republican and therefore hated by half the country. Others told me that by distancing myself from Republicans, I would end up angering the other half of the country. And the sad truth is that they were both right. That's how suspicious we've become of one another. That's how divided we are as a nation. If we were to pay reparations today, we would only divide the country further, making it harder to build the political coalitions required to solve the problems facing Black people today. We would insult many Black Americans by putting a price on the suffering of their ancestors.
Hold up real quick. So the insult to him is that our ancestors finally get acknowledged and that their descendants get an actual fair opportunity to build for themselves. He's saying that that's a disrespect. No, the disrespect is the fact that in 2019, we're still having conversations about reparations. That's the disrespect. The disrespect is after centuries of being lynched, owned, sold, raped, mutilated, treated worse than cattle because they didn't treat their cattle that bad, being treated worse than animals. After all that, we still have to have a conversation about if we should have reparations or how we should have reparations, or just a hearing or a study about reparations. That's the disrespect. I don't think none of my ancestors would be rolling in their graves if we got cut a check and some land and were able to incorporate our own government. That's what they wanted. That's why Nat Turner was revolting. That's why Denmark Vesey was revolting. That's why Haiti revolted. That's why so many of our people revolted and rebelled. It was because we wanted freedom. We wanted full, complete freedom and control of our own destiny. So really, the disrespect to our ancestors comes from Negroes like this. Even the white lady to the left look appalled by what he's saying. Like, wow, I can't believe that this Negro, wow. The degree of treachery is even surprising to them.
And we would turn the relationship between Black Americans and white Americans from a coalition into a transaction, from a union between citizens into a lawsuit between plaintiffs and defendants.
Yeah.
What we should do is pay reparations to Black Americans who actually grew up under Jim Crow and were directly harmed by second-class citizenship.
That's all of us.
People like my grandparents. But paying reparations to all descendants of slaves is a mistake. Take me, for example. I was born 3 decades after the end of Jim Crow into a privileged household in the suburbs.
All right, so here's what they do, and here's what I mentioned last video, and here's what kind of was the theme of the whole of 90% of this hearing was Black people who claim privileged Black status, who are saying because of that there shouldn't be any compensation. That's kind of like in line with Mitch McConnell said when he said, "Hey, you guys had Barack Obama. Hey, you guys are in the NFL. Hey, you don't need reparations. You're doing just fine." So this is what they're using this cat for. I know he doesn't represent the youth, as some people like to say. He represents a particular brand of Negro whom we don't associate with. And they knew this when they brought him in, but this is the game that they play. And when we don't have media, our own media that can put out our own narrative and what we really think, this is what goes out to the world to allow white people to feel comfortable knowing that there are Negroes that will fight against their own best interests. And partly why that is a working mechanism is because part of the narrative of reparations, which I keep hearing, which isn't true, is that we're demanding a check from the federal government, which isn't true. We demand a check from those who waxed rich during the enslavement process, those companies and corporations. The government also benefited, but they benefited institutionally and infrastructure-wise for the most part. And that's why when you read the 10-point program, you'll have more clarity. Obviously, he did it. Obviously, he didn't really study too much of the HR or who really submitted the HR 40. He's using talking points given to him by those who he identifies with, more so than himself.
I attend an Ivy League school, yet I'm also descended from slaves who worked on Thomas Jefferson's Monticello plantation. So reparations for slavery would allocate federal resources to me.
Why does he sound offended by that?
But not to an American with the wrong ancestry, even if that person is living paycheck to paycheck and working multiple jobs to support a family. You might call that justice.
Look at the brother in the
I
back,
call
man.
it justice for the dead at the price of justice for the living. I understand that reparations are about what people are owed, regardless of how well they're doing. I understand that. But the people who are owed for slavery are no longer here, and we're not entitled to collect on their debts.
So we're not entitled to collect on the debt that's left by our ancestors, even though these corporations are still entitled to leverage their wealth in more ways that their ancestors accumulated through the atrocity of our enslavement. So it's okay for them to capitalize and continue to capitalize off of their ancestors' oppression over us, but it's not fair for us to be compensated for what we've never been compensated for. That doesn't make sense. But this is the thing that says he understands that reparations is about correcting the wrongs of the past. So to correct the wrongs of the past, reparations is due. It's mandatory. Japanese got reparations. Jewish people got reparations. The Confederates got reparations. The natives have got reparations. Anyone who's been done wrong got reparations. They didn't have to have 30 years of study and hundreds of years of pontification. Or what we got was the 40 acres and a mule promise that was never delivered. But this is the argument that this dude's making right now.
Reparations, by definition, are only given to victims. So the moment you give me reparations, you've made me into a victim without my consent. Not just
no, listen to the audacity of this dude. No, he just noted the fact that we're being incarcerated and our schools are underfunded and our neighborhoods aren't safe. All these are systematically the effect of slavery, Jim Crow, oppression, black codes, discrimination that continues to today, slavery, which continues to today by a different name. It morphed from peasantry and sharecropping and all these different forms to now free labor in prison. So these things are still affecting us, but he's saying it's going to make us a victim. Those things don't make us a victim, but getting a check and getting compensated will make us victims. This is the logic of the argument against reparations. The logic is, hey, if we give it to you, if you give it to us, is what he's saying, it makes us victims. So right now we're not victims, but we'll be victims as soon as we get compensated for what our ancestors did and compensated for what we continue to go through. And as soon as we get an even level playing field and an opportunity to build our own communities and build our own nation and government and have land and compensation and the other things that reparations addresses, that's going to make us the victim, according to him.
just that, you've made 1/3 of Black Americans who poll against reparations into victims without their consent.
1/3, I don't think so.
And Black Americans have fought too long for the right to define themselves, to be spoken for in such a condescending manner. The question is not what America owes me by virtue of my ancestry. The question is what all Americans owe each other.
Let me go ahead and pause that real quick. I mean, the fact that he's reading from a piece of paper kind of lets me know that these are actually his own words. I mean, like for somebody to come up and speak about something like reparations, you wouldn't think that you would need a whole speech written, maybe some bullet points, things that you don't want to forget, like stats, historic markers of certain times. But why would you need to read your own thoughts on the subject? Are these even his words?
By virtue of being citizens of the same nation. And the obligation of citizenship is not transactional. It's not contingent on ancestry. It never expires, and it can't be paid off. For all these reasons, Bill H.R. 40 is a moral and political mistake. Thank you.
So the more, I mean, just listen to this dude, and then remember that this is the dude we're talking about, okay? Listen to that dude, and remember that this is, let's go ahead and let's get it. This is the dude that we're talking about here. He's talking about morality, this guy. This guy is saying it's a moral mistake to right the wrong. After saying he understands reparations is about right and the wrong, he says he's in essence saying that it's morally compromising to right the wrongs of the past. It's not morally compromising what we went through and what we still go through, but to actually try to make that right is the morally wrong thing to do. HR 40 is morally wrong. Now, if you were to take 100 Black people, you'd be hard pressed to find one who would say this. So they really sifted the flour. They really searched through that straw and found that needle in the haystack of a coon that would actually be against reparatory justice. They couldn't even get Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton to do something like that. They couldn't even get a Candace Owens to do something like that, but they found this Negro. Yes, indeed. They found this guy right here to say that it'd be morally wrong to give Black people reparations. Because if they said it themselves, we would see exactly what it was. So they had to use one of our own to do so. So what I want to say to y'all as I close this is just make sure that y'all get involved. Make sure your voice is heard. Make sure you share things like this. Make sure you tweet and share things all over social media to let the world know how we feel about it. Make sure that you organize. Make sure that you're on the right side of this argument. Make sure that you're educated on this argument. Quit letting them tell people that reparations is about the federal government giving us a check. Nope. We want the check from those who wax rich. That's the J.P. Morgan Chases, the Wells Fargos, the tobacco industry, the AIG, the Aetna, the clothing companies that came from the cotton industry. That's and you know, check out Jay Dizzle and Nettercat YouTube channel, and I break down some of these companies that wax rich from slavery. And I want you to check that out and do your own studies of what companies benefited. And check out the IBW21.org 10-point reparations program. Support NCOBRA, the Republic of New Africa, because that's what this reparations movement, it really got steam from. Understand that from what we did, from what we continue to do in Black media and even Black social media is the reason why they're even having this hearing, is one of the big reasons why they're having this hearing. So shout out to ADOS, even though I don't agree with everything. But it's our voice that they're trying to pacify, but they're trying to neutralize it at the same time. So make sure that you're involved, and we can't be cooning, and we can't be soft shoeing and buck dancing, and we can't be apologetic about our demands, because we won't be respected like that. You'll never see Jewish people off code about their reparations. You'll never see natives or any other ethnicity off code about receiving what is due to them. But it's too easy and too often that they can find our own that'll be off code about what's in our best interest. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you check out. Oh yeah, another thing also, because we know we got to speak about reparations. We also have to speak about what we have to do ourselves in order for this movement, and what we have to do for ourselves, which is be economically sound, politically sound, and you know, study things like blockchain and cryptocurrency. And there's a link to a browser in this video description in which you can actually earn Bitcoin just for using the browser, and it's free to do. That's all I want to say. Peace.